Welcome to the Sana Project, where we take you well beyond our everyday skin clinic practices and give you insights to our philosophy. This collaborative podcast is hosted by our team and guest experts in various fields. So let us take you to Skinfinity and beyond, where we will be covering topics on skin, internal health, mind, soul, energy, life, and integrated practices. Our hope is to spark thoughts that resonate and serve you to make conscious choices to live your best life. So sit back, relax, and let's get into it. Hello everyone, I am here with Georgia. We've got a new face on the podcast and we like to refer to her as the resident skin nerd, and I'm sure in this episode you'll pretty quickly work out why we've given her that name. So welcome, Georgia.
Hello, thank you for having me.
Do you want to start off by telling us all a little bit about yourself and your studies and just how you got into this kind of position?
Yeah. So my name's Georgia. Like Karla said, I'm actually on uni break at the moment, which is so exciting. I've got about 5 or 6 months left of my degree that I'm currently doing, and that is an associate's degree in applied health science, with a major and focus on dermal therapy.
Ooh, and how long does that go for?
It's a 2-year course, so yeah, 5-6 months left of my second year. And then hopefully next year I'll do the bachelor's. I think I'm on a roll with studies, so that's the goal. But, life can always kind of throw curveballs at you. So who knows? But that's, the end goal is to get the bachelor's.
Nice.
Yeah.
So I guess for a lot of people, skin can be tricky to navigate. It's hard to understand. How would you explain it to someone who doesn't really know much about it? Just sort of in simple terms, like where would we start?
Yeah. So the easiest way to start when looking at the skin is my favorite analogy that I learned here actually at Sana from Christine, and that is that your skin is like a brick wall. So if you think of a brick wall, it has bricks and then it has the mortar. And then if you think of that in a house, like it's there to protect everything that's inside the house, from weather, from animals, from anything that can, try and enter, even like people. So if you think of your skin like that, so our skin cells are our bricks, and then our oils, any good bacteria that sit on our skin, all that stuff, our water, that's essentially that mortar or that concrete that sits in between the bricks to protect our skin cells. And if you've got a really old rundown house where the bricks are, slipping out because the concrete's not there to hold it in anymore, you get moldy carpets, you get really cold house because all the air is getting in, especially at the moment.
Don't want that.
No, it's not fun. And it's like when that happens, it's panic mode. Oh my God, we've got to tear this down and start again. Or it's, oh my gosh, we've got to patch this up. And it's the same thing with our skin. If something's not working in the balance of our lipid and water ratio, or our skin cells aren't functioning the way they should be, not getting what they need, you start to have these little cracks and little holes, and little things can get in, but the things that are also supposed to be in our skin can get out, which isn't good either.
Okay, so is that kind of where you think a lot of the issues kind of arise from, not having that good structure?
Yeah, a lot of the time skin conditions come from our skin barrier not being there to protect our skin. So when I say skin barrier, I'm talking about this little it's 3 layers essentially to the skin barrier that protect our skin from the outside world, so our skin can protect our organs from the outside world.
Okay, so now that we've got this, now that we're all sitting here imagining a cute little brick wall, do you want to tell us kind of what makes up the skin?
Yeah, I can sure do that. Now, if I say something that's probably way too nerdy, please let me know and I can break it down a little bit.
I can tell you're already getting really excited. You're like, ooh, yeah, the juicy questions.
The jitters. So our skin is actually part of a bigger system called the integumentary system, which consists of our skin, hair, nails, and glands, like your sweat glands and your oil glands. So it's not a standalone thing. It works with a couple other little I forgot the word, other things like your hair and your nails, like I said. Our skin consists of 3 main layers, and in those layers they've got their own layers. So like Shrek said, ogres have layers, onions have layers. Guess what? We have layers too. So if we look at our skin, we can break it down into the epidermis being the most superficial, the outermost layer of our skin, the dermis, and then the subcutaneous or the hypodermis. It's interchange with those 2 words depending on who you're talking to, but they're both the correct terminology for that bottom layer. The epidermis is made up of 5 layers, and from top to bottom they are our stratum corneum, our stratum lucidum, which, fun fact, is actually only found in certain parts of the body, like at the palms of our hands, the soles of our feet, where we've got that thicker skin that kind of needs a bit of texture to it. That's where we find that layer. Then we have our stratum granulosum, stratum spinosum, and then the basal layer. Following the basal layer, we then find our dermis. And our dermis has 2 layers, the papillary layer and then the reticular layer. The dermis is also the thickest part of the skin. Underneath that is the subcutaneous hypodermis, where you find like a bunch of fat deposits, you find your veins, your arteries. It's a no-go zone for us. When we're treating skin, we can go dermis and epidermis, but subcutaneous we don't touch because that's the layer that literally sits right above everything else in your body. But yeah, that's kind of like a little breakdown of the skin.
It's crazy because like when you kind of just look at your skin, you're like, oh, it doesn't look like a whole lot. But then when you break it down, there are like so many layers within all the layers. Like it's actually crazy how much is there. Like when you just look at it and you're like, oh yeah, it's my skin.
Well, if you think about it, the epidermis, it has 5 layers, but it's like the thickness of a tissue, those 5 layers. So there's 5 layers, but they're super, super thin. So it doesn't take much to actually take the epidermis off, which is wild. That, like, you know, you look at your skin and you go, oh yeah, like it's biggest organ in the body, like it's protecting the insides. But when you think about it logically, like it's literally just like this thin little thing that's like wrapped around. And you know how fragile tissues are. Like that's your skin.
I hope everyone understands like why we find this so fascinating now. Just having a little bit more of an insight.
Yeah, I hope so. I hope no one's sitting here going, why is this fascinating to someone?
I know. Look, we might still seem nerdy to some people, but
probably.
Well,
that's okay.
So we often in clinic as well will talk about this skin barrier a lot.
Yes.
Do you want to maybe explain more about that and why it's so important and why it's such a fundamental thing that we work on as therapists?
Yeah. So like I mentioned a little bit before, the skin barrier has like 3 kind of layers or aspects to it. And those 3 layers include our acid mantle and microbiome, the stratum corneum, so the outermost layer of the epidermis, and our multilaminar lipid structure. So these 3 things combined allow our skin to function and stay at a state of homeostasis or balance in the skin. It allows our skin to do what it needs to do on a day-to-day basis to produce new skin cells, to shed the old dirty skin cells, get rid of any pathogens that might be trying to enter, you know, flush anything that you're putting in that's nasty and the skin's like, I don't want this. It also stops, you know, our free radicals, any actual harmful bacteria or viruses from getting in and causing issues in our skin. Obviously, sometimes they do slip past even with a really healthy skin, and that's just because they're really evil little creatures, little pathogens that can get past. But I want to break down those 3 things.
Yeah, tell us about them
a little bit more. Yeah. So our acid mantle and the skin's microbiome, they help to support our enzyme activity. They stabilize the permeability barrier. So that means like how our skin absorbs certain products and certain things. They protect against any irritants, bacteria, pathogens, like I said. And they also help to slow transepidermal water loss, which I don't think we talk about enough, but it's such a wild thing. And that essentially is just talking about in our dermis and our epidermis, a lot of it is made up of water. I know a lot of people talk about the amazing product hyaluronic acid, and our skin loves that if it's got the right water concentration and if you're applying it with water. That's how your skin absorbs it. Transepidermal water loss occurs when there's no kind of oils or your lipids sitting on top, and that water just disappears, and that gives you that dehydrated, that dry, that sad feeling skin that you just feel like you need to constantly put more and more and more and more on. But it also can have the opposite effect where some people feel like they're really oily because that water is just sitting on the surface of their skin. So they just continue to strip and strip and strip away at their skin. It's also important to note that our skin has a natural pH of about 4.7 to 5.7. Certain products can change this, certain environments can change this. So if our skin falls out of that, happy place of pH balance, we can start to see issues within our skin as well. Now, I also mentioned the multilamellar lipid structure.
What is that? Yeah.
So scary. And that is it's literally just talking about the oils and the waters within our skin. And that's, kind of that concrete that holds the skin cells in. They're the things that keep the skin cells moisturized, healthy, and fed well. And they're made up of like our ceramides, our cholesterols, the free fatty acids, which I'm sure a lot of people know what those words mean, as opposed to multilamellar lipid structure. This structure itself helps to regulate cell turnover. They help with our desquamation process, which is our body's natural exfoliation process. It's when the skin cell comes to the end of its life cycle, it falls off, and that is our desquamation. And I think that's pretty much it on the skin barrier, but it's a super, super important function, and it's not talked enough about when we look at skin online. Obviously, when you go to clinics and everything, everyone raves about it. But when you look at like influencers talking about skin, or like just brands that are online talking about it, they don't really ever talk about the skin barrier. Yeah, it's often
quite missed. Yeah.
And when it's missed, you tend to you're not even putting a Band-Aid over your skin. You're just ignoring one of the main flaws in the skin as to why it's not functioning correctly.
Yeah. Okay, so we've talked about a few of those things. Let's talk about skin cells. Let's get excited and chat all things skin cells. What can you tell us about those?
Okay, so the main cell of the epidermis is our keratinocyte. Our keratinocyte is our skin cell. It's made up of keratin, which I know a lot of people will have heard about because keratin is amazing for your hair. It's amazing for your nails. That's what most of them are made out of. So that's where that comes from. It is, like I mentioned, it is part of our skin barrier defense because it lives in the stratum corneum, but it also lives in all the other layers of the skin. So I will break down kind of how they work in each layer as well to give a bit more understanding. But let's look at some facts about the keratinocyte first.
We love a good fun fact.
I feel like this is always a good place to start. Before we jump right into the heavier stuff, let's have some little fun facts. So our keratinocytes account for around 70 to 80% of the cellular population within our skin. So like I said, they're the main cell of the epidermis. They
taking charge.
are really taking charge. 90% of the time when you're touching your skin like I am now, you're touching your keratinocytes. Maybe have a couple other ones in there, but it's really just them. They're a hydrophobic cell, and they can communicate with other cells in the epidermis and even the dermis to kind of govern what responses occur within the skin. They also work along another fun little cell in our epidermis called the melanocyte, and this is our pigment producing cell. They work together to help protect the nucleus of the cell. So the nucleus is just essentially the brain of the cell. It's what tells the cell what to do. So if the nucleus is in any way vulnerable, that cell's not going to be able to function properly. So let's look at the life cycle. So they're born in the basal layer of the epidermis. That's where they're attached to a blood supply that comes up through the dermis. And this is where they replicate and replicate and replicate through a process called mitosis. Once they're born, they then begin their journey up through the epidermis, traveling through every single layer until they eventually fall off and they're just kind of like lost in the world.
And then remind us, what is it when they fall off? What is that process called?
That process is called desquamation.
Bingo.
It's a good one. And that word took me so long to learn how to say.
Yeah, it's a bit of a tongue twister. I try not to say it.
Honestly, a lot of skin words are just like, who came up with this?
They're a bit hectic, yeah.
Okay, so once the keratinocyte heads out of the basal layer, it enters our stratum spinosum. This is where we see that cellular interaction begin to occur, specifically with the melanocyte, so the pigment-producing cell. That's pretty much what they do in the spinosum. That's where that really important communication comes through. Sometimes they'll miss it and they'll just go on up. Sometimes they'll get it. It just depends what's going on the day, UV exposure, all that fun stuff. From there, they travel up into the stratum granulosum, where the keratinization process begins. This is a process where the cells essentially just begin to break down. So they're kind of dying at this point. Although they're not entirely dead, they're just starting to lose some of their functions. They're starting to compact a little bit more. And if you think about it like granulosum, granule, so our cells, rather than being a nice plump, juicy grape, are starting to kind of shrink a little. They're still healthy, but they're just turning into more of a crispy, sugar-covered grape.
Yeah.
Rather than an unhealthy cell that'll turn into a raisin because it's really just got nothing going on for it.
I'm loving these little references here. I hope our listeners are kind of understanding a little bit more now that they can picture something as well.
I feel like the references is what helped me and kind of what got me to this nerd obsession with skin.
Yeah, 100%.
Because if I didn't have them, I think I'd be completely
off with
lost.
fairies.
Yeah, I'd be like, what does that even mean? So, that's where we see that kind of breakdown occur. Then we have the stratum lucidum, or it's sometimes referred to as the transitional layer. This is where we see the release of some of the lamellar granules, which they ultimately go on to help form the multilaminar lipid structure, which is your ceramides, your cholesterols, your free fatty acids. So that's how they come into play.
And what is that part of?
That is part of our skin barrier.
Yay! Like quizzing you here.
Giving quizzes, I'm getting heart palpitations. I'm oh gosh, I didn't know there was those questions. And then finally we reach the stratum corneum. This is the final stage of their life cycle. All cellular functions are kind of done. Full compaction occurs, and then eventually the desquamation happens. So they leave us. Sometimes they take a little bit longer than they should. This process also lasts roughly around 28 to 40 days, and it's fully dependent on age, genetics, skin health, and a bunch of other factors as well. So it varies quite a lot between individuals, but on average it's 28 to 40 days.
Well, thank you for the little rundown on the skin and just how it functions in the skin cycle.
No worries. So that was a pretty brief summary, also chucking in some fun little facts in there for you. But obviously the more we go into the podcast, the more we talk about certain skin conditions, skin treatments.
Be a bit more specific as well.
Even just people's journeys with their skin. We'll be a lot more specific with certain aspects of the skin. So there'll be a time where we talk more about our melanocytes or even just dermal factors as well. But that's kind of all we needed to really touch on today, was just
give everyone a bit of a base sort of reference point, I think.
Yeah, kind of what we teach everyone who comes in for a consult anyway. Yeah.
Yeah. All right, cool. We'll leave it at that. But yeah, if you guys ever have any questions or anything, definitely let us know or come in and see us. Yeah.
I'd love to chat to anyone about the skin. So
yeah, if you haven't noticed, we love it. So
go on for days.
All right. Well, hopefully we'll see you guys in clinic.
Yeah. See ya.
If you enjoyed this episode, share it with your friends and get involved in our socials to help shape the topics on this podcast. We'd love to meet you. You can simply book from our webpage or reach out. We are here to help.